Imagine commanding armies in the scorching heat of the desert, face to face with Saladin, one of the greatest generals in history, and doing so while your own body is slowly consumed by leprosy. This was the daily challenge of Baldwin IV, the young king of Jerusalem, also known as the Leper King. But behind the frail image of a diseased sovereign, there was a sharp tactical mind, a true master of the art of medieval warfare in the East. In this video, we will dive into the combat tactics used by Baldwin IV during his short but impactful reign. How did he manage to defeat or hold off forces far superior in number? What strategies did he use to compensate for the inferiority of the Crusader armies? And how did his leadership shape the battlefield in a time when religion, honor, and survival were brutally intertwined? Stay with us until the end, because you will discover not only how Baldwin fought, but how he thought, and how his military genius challenged both his enemies and the limits of his own body. For Baldwin, war was more than battle. It was an exercise of intelligence and faith. In the 12th century, the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem was a Christian enclave planted in the heart of the Middle East, surrounded by Muslim forces in constant reorganization. Founded after the First Crusade, the kingdom lived in permanent tension with the emerging Islamic powers, especially with the growing dominance of Saladin, Sultan of Egypt and Syria. The Crusaders, outnumbered, depended on unstable alliances, strategic fortresses, and the skill of their leaders to survive. It was in this scenario, amid wars of attrition, ambushes, and pitched battles, that Baldwin took the throne and began to demonstrate his military mastery. From a young age, Baldwin showed a sharp mind, trained not only in the scriptures but also in the military arts. Educated by William of Tyre, who soon noticed his health condition, the prince never allowed leprosy to define his capabilities as a leader. When he took the throne in the middle of 1174, Jerusalem lived under the constant threat of Saladin, who was unifying the Muslim forces with frightening speed. Against him, Baldwin would have to use something more lethal than swords: cunning. One of the great hallmarks of Baldwin's command style was his tactical mobility. Unlike the traditional European model, which favored large, heavy armies, the Leper King adapted his forces to the Eastern environment, investing in quick movements, reconnaissance groups, and surprise actions. His Frankish cavalry, though small, was trained to attack in a coordinated manner and retreat in order, avoiding being encircled by enemies in open field. This became evident in one of the most brilliant episodes of his career, the Battle of Montgisard, fought in the year 1177. With only about 500 knights and a limited contingent of infantry, Baldwin faced a Muslim army estimated at more than 20,000 men. The key to victory was knowledge of the terrain and the timing of the attack. Baldwin ordered a forced march to intercept the enemy on the coastal plains, before Saladin could reorganize his scattered troops after an exhausting campaign. Moreover, Baldwin knew how to use fortified defensive positions with mastery. On several occasions, he resorted to the strategy of luring the enemy close to fortresses, where archers and knights could respond with maximum effectiveness. Cities like Jerusalem, Ascalon, and Kerak became centers not only of power, but of planned resistance, with reinforced supplies and secret exits for counterattacks. Another important weapon in his repertoire was psychological warfare. Baldwin IV would appear in public on horseback, even with his body weakened by leprosy, to maintain troop morale and impress both allies and enemies. Saladin, who respected him deeply, knew he was facing an adversary whose strength lay more in intellect and will than in muscles. This also influenced diplomacy. Baldwin was able to maintain internal cohesion among Frankish nobles, even amid rivalries and territorial disputes. On the battlefield, he used bait and feigned retreats to weaken enemy lines. In smaller confrontations, such as the skirmishes in the region of Samaria and Transjordan, Baldwin instructed his commanders to fake a retreat, only to lure the enemy into narrow valleys where they could be ambushed. His command of supply routes and campaign timing was also crucial. He knew that Saladin depended on long logistical lines and thus attacked at the right moment, usually when the Islamic armies were far from their bases, tired and poorly supplied. Even in the final stages of his life, when he already had motor difficulties and leprosy advanced relentlessly, Baldwin continued to plan campaigns with precision, appointing trusted regents and laying out clear guidelines. His presence on the field, sometimes being carried in a litter, was a symbol of resistance and faith. As Baldwin's health deteriorated, his mind remained sharp. Leprosy advanced, limiting his mobility and undermining his physical strength. But that did not stop him from playing a central role in the military and political decisions of the kingdom. Behind the scenes, Baldwin refined his tactics even further. He sought to maintain supremacy in key areas of the territory and undermined attempts at Islamic unification under Saladin. As the disease progressed, the king ceased to personally lead some campaigns, but continued to draw up strategic plans with precision, relying on commanders like Reynald of Chatillon and the Grand Master of the Templars. He knew that the strength of the kingdom came not only from weapons, but from internal cohesion, and therefore he skillfully intervened in disputes among barons, trying to maintain a fragile balance between powerful nobles and religious factions. A remarkable example of this military policy combined with diplomacy occurred when Saladin besieged the fortress of Kerak in the year 1183. Even extremely weakened, Baldwin was taken to the battlefield in a litter, covered with cloaks, his face disfigured and his hands bandaged. His mere presence was enough to force Saladin to retreat, a gesture of respect, but also of recognition of the danger that man still represented. Baldwin also understood the importance of timely alliances. During his reign, he made temporary agreements with Muslim leaders who were rivals of Saladin, trying to divide the enemy front. His view of war was not merely Christian versus Islamic, it was geopolitical, pragmatic. He used the fragmentation of the Islamic world as a defensive tool, which significantly delayed the consolidation of Saladin's power over the Middle East. However, with the intensification of the disease, Baldwin began to face a new challenge: the risk of succession instability. Knowing he would have no heirs, he tried to ensure that the throne remained firm in the face of internal and external threats. For this reason, he crowned his nephew Baldwin V as co-king during his lifetime, in an attempt to protect the succession and maintain the continuity of the Crusader resistance. Even in this moment of extreme physical weakness, Baldwin continued to influence the course of the war. He understood that war was not fought only on the battlefield, but also in palace halls, in baronial assemblies, and in agreements between military orders. His leadership inspired the organized defense of fortresses and the constant vigilance of the borders. Another often overlooked but important aspect of his military vision was the psychological preparation of the troops. Baldwin IV valued faith as a moral element of combat. In his speeches, he emphasized that the struggle was not only for the kingdom's survival, but for the protection of the holy places, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, the Holy Sepulchre. Thus, he mobilized not only soldiers, but also popular devotion, calling on knights from the west and keeping the crusading spirit alive. With his death in 1185, the Holy Land lost not only a king, but a singular strategist. His successors failed to maintain the delicate balance between military strength, diplomacy, and faith. In a short time, leadership mistakes would lead to the disastrous defeat at Hattin and the loss of Jerusalem. The art of war for Baldwin IV was not based on brute force, but on constant adaptation to the enemy, the environment, and his own sick body. He fought as best he could to the end, like a true Crusader king, with a sword in one hand and his mind turned toward heaven. Baldwin was not just a Crusader king. He was a master of war in dark times, a strategist who faced not only Saladin's armies, but also the decay of his own body. Even stricken by leprosy, he stood firm, leading with courage, wisdom, and unwavering faith. His combat tactics, his reading of the terrain, and his ability to maintain the unity of a besieged kingdom made him a unique figure in medieval history. More than victories or defeats, Baldwin left a legacy of intelligent resistance, of leadership grounded in principle, and of the ability to transform physical weakness into moral strength. His reign is a powerful reminder that in war, as in life, courage and intellect can transcend human limitations. If you were moved or learned something new from this story, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment about which episode you'd like to see next, and subscribe to the channel to follow more fascinating accounts from medieval history. Baldwin's saga lives on, and we still have much to tell about this king who defied his time